Welcome back to the Mike Sennello Show. Tonight is going to be our last chance podcast. And by that, I mean there's a lot of things going on tomorrow night at tomorrow night's town council meeting, for which it will be the last opportunity to get your voice heard. So first things first, one of the big things that's going to be on the agenda we'll be bringing up later tonight is something that I've talked about endlessly on this show, and that is the Chernisky Road Bridge. Petition is in this video's description. I'll forward that so you guys right here can see that. And that's the petition I have to basically instruct the town council, since that item is going to be on tomorrow night's agenda, to demand of the town council to instruct DPW, Department of Public Works, to build the damn bridge as the petition here shows. I've also got the paper copy here. So folks, if you want to get your name onto these petitions, this is really your last opportunity to do it. I am going to share something onto the main and Milford page so as many people see it as possible tomorrow. Speaking of which, tomorrow I'll be in the E. Paul Martin room setting up for tomorrow night's town council meeting. So last chance to get your name on the written copy of the petition. So message me if you want to get onto that. Ray Lillis is also carrying around that same printed copy, so you can get those paper. You can sign his version of the same petition if you'd like instead. And Ray, if you're watching, make sure you stop by Town Hall tomorrow, probably in the early afternoon, so I can get the signatures that you've gotten concatenated with the ones that I've gotten too. So as folks have seen, this is the petition online on change.org. This is not something I take lightly. This is not something I commonly do. So I'll go ahead and share the link to that in the comments section here. This is on Facebook, and we'll go to YouTube. For those watching, yes, of course, we are dual broadcasting, both on Facebook and on YouTube. So that's one of the main things that's going to be on tomorrow night's agenda. And we've beaten that one to death, and we'll be talking about that later tonight. So I'm not going to get too much into it right this moment. Real quick, we're going to have a lot of things to go over tonight. This could be a short show, and at the very end of the show, if we have time, we'll do some bonus material on the news that's kind of breaking with other petitions in town. One that's in relation to New Milford Public Schools Superintendent Alicia DeCorpo. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. If you've seen that petition related to her, just so folks know, we'll hope if we have time, we'll talk about that on tonight's show. So do go ahead and share this video's link into those pages if you get a chance. And hopefully we'll be able to bring some people into that conversation. The only thing that's really of any significance, speaking of things that are coming up, and speaking of last chances, there was a town council special meeting last Monday night to essentially do nothing but set dates. They set the annual town meeting for the budget. That's going to be May 3rd, 2022. That is not Tuesday as in 2 days from now, but it's the Tuesday after that one. 2 weeks later, the proposed date from town council for the budget referendum is May 17th. That's also a Tuesday. So the annual town meeting is the last chance for you to have any part of this in any way, and as it relates to the budget process before it goes to referendum. And then the referendum is going to be your opportunity to have your say in the matter. Now, I've said on the last show that this meeting was kind of a bit of redundancy, and there's an opportunity here for charter revision, so we don't have to drag all of these volunteers and me into the E. Paul Martin room on 7 o'clock on a Monday night. Why this couldn't be just done by the Board of Finance during their 5-minute meeting for their budget deliberations the Thursday before that, I don't know, other than, of course, the legal ramifications. It's in the charter. Again, this to me seems like an opportunity for charter revision. And so folks know, here's the entire meeting from Monday night. And yes, folks know, just so folks know, this is the entire meeting. We called a special meeting for this.
I'd like to move on to the agenda. We've gone through public comment. The next is discussion and possible action on the approval of setting the date of the annual town meeting for the 2022-2023 municipal and Board of Education budgets for May 3rd, 2022, as per the town charter.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any discussion? Thank you. Next, discussion and possible action on the approval of the setting of the date of the annual town municipal budget and Board of Education budget referendum for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Suggested date is May 17th, 2022.
So move. Second.
Okay, so moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody.
That was the whole meeting. That was the whole meeting. Katie Francis stood up and did about 2 minutes of public comment, and then that was the entire meeting, under a minute long. So I hope everybody's on board with me on this one. I hope I'm not the crazy one in the room, right? Do we not see this as a clear opportunity for charter revision that would improve this process, certainly? And again, we're going to come back to charter revision because I've talked about over the past few months and into the past year or so about how not only do we not have a legal requirement, we have a legal requirement to have a charter revision commission set up every 10 years. Pete, on my interview with him, said that he would like to see that happen more often. We could just have one basically every year if we wanted to, and have the results be, you know what, in almost every year, we're not making any recommendations for revision. To me, this seems like a golden opportunity for revision. I've talked about other places for revision. It may not be a bad idea to go ahead and put that commission together, as we'll see when we start to talk about some more of this, as you'll see throughout the course of the show as we get further into this subject. So that was the entire meeting. Mark your calendars. May 17th is going to be the budget referendum. May 3rd is going to be the town meeting to effectively, from what I understand, just reaffirm the date. And that's basically all there's going to be in terms of that town meeting. Let me adjust my volume here because I'm peaking a little bit. And tomorrow night, as we talked about things moving forward, we are going to have the town council meeting. So folks know the agenda has been released. This is what the agenda looks like. Let's go ahead and zoom in so people can see this better. Of course, this is what the agendas look like. This is the information for the Zoom meeting, the Zoom version of this meeting. And then we have the items of the consent agenda, which we always start off, the items of agenda, which always start off with the Pledge of Allegiance and then go into public comment. It's extremely common for the agenda to go into the consent part of the agenda. And I kind of want to talk about what the consent agenda is in just a second, but we'll go over the items of the consent agenda. A, B, C, D. Prior minutes, tax collector, Parks and Rec, fire marshal. We're going to expand on the minutes part of this because we had to talk about this in the last episode of the show. And we would never, ever talk about the minutes as being a part of the agenda we actually have to talk about if it weren't for the treatment that section has gotten over the last few months by a certain small contingent of people. So before I get started with exploding on that, the consent agenda was something that was created by Dr. Peter Mullen, a Democrat. Excuse me, I got to turn up my headphone volume. And which was a great idea. The idea being that there are a number of things that are on each agenda, which there's going to be no opposition to. I would relate them to the concept of the flag bill. They're bills that are just, there's no way people are going to be voting against them. So a flag bill gets its name from the concept of, a bill is presented before the House, let's say in Hartford, and the bill is to replace a flag that's torn apart in front of the Capitol building. Who in their right mind is ever going to vote against that? That's going to be a 100-0 voting in favor. It's something you're wasting time spending even more than 10 seconds on it. The consent agenda was a way, and it wasn't Peter Mullen's idea in terms of concept, but it was his bringing this concept to the town council that allowed for the creation of the consent agenda. These are items where there's just not going to be any opposition. You reach out to the party leaderships before the meeting and you say there are things on this agenda that we're all going to be just voting in favor of or against, and there's no point in having any conversation. Excuse me. So you vote on all of these things at once, and the idea of a consent agenda, because it's a consent agenda, is there's not supposed to actually be any commentary on the agenda, on the consent agenda. And if you want to talk about an item on the consent agenda, you simply say, I would like to talk about it, and it gets removed entirely from the consent agenda and becomes its own agenda item by default. So if you want to talk about the prior minutes, then what you do is you raise your hand, you say, I'd like to talk about the prior minutes, and then you remove that item from the consent agenda, and then you say, okay, does anybody have any objections to B, C, and D? And then you just vote on B, C, and D, and you'd be done. This makes these meetings go by a whole lot quicker, and since nobody in the room is getting paid to be there besides me, since everyone on the town council is a volunteer, and everyone watching both at home and in the room are people who, again, aren't really getting paid to be there. They're just you and me, the residents of this town who are interested in the things that take place in our town government. And it's an efficient way to just get through things. And it's not an efficient way to say we're going to have a 9-0 vote on something, because maybe somebody says, you know what, when it comes to the park and recreation thing, I'm going to vote against it. But the whole point is that these are a package of things to vote for or against, rather than a single item. And there is a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place to say, I'm willing to vote against the entire packet because of like an item on there, or to say, listen, I don't want to have to vote against the entire packet because of this one item, so let's remove that from the consent agenda. But everything else you can vote in favor of. And this gets through these meetings for these clerical votes, like things like the approval of the prior minutes, in a much more timely and efficient manner. Again, this was a good idea introduced to town council by Dr. Peter Mullen. I have to excuse me, folks. Yeah, there we go. That gets me a little bit more centered to frame. It wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Sennello Show, of course, without technical difficulties. Let's hope that's the limit of those technical difficulties. So this is something that I have been in favor of from day one. I loved the idea when Peter Mullen introduced it, just to get us through the parts of the meetings that aren't controversial at all. And the minutes have, until the last 5 minutes, have not ever been controversial. Even when there were amendments to make, it didn't take as long as it did. There wasn't this idiotic back and forth. There weren't complaints. There was just simply a filing of amendments to the minutes and then a vote. And that's it. And that's something this is why the minutes have always been on the consent agenda since the installation of the consent agenda, again, by a Democrat, and which was a good idea by a Democrat. So if anyone keeps continuing, for those at home who are continuing the slander of partisan bias on my part, no, genuine Democrat, genuinely good idea. Speaking of genuine Democrats and genuinely good ideas, we talked about the minutes last week, and we talked about the hackery that was going on in previous meetings. And I finally managed to dig up some video of Democrat Lisa Hita making revisions, proposing amendments and revisions to the minutes. And here's what this can look like. By the way, here's what this can look like, and we're going to go through this. There's some speeding up I have to do because she's reading her revisions into the record, which means it's something she's doing because she has an obligation to do it. It's an obligatory reading of the minutes into the record, not because she thinks it's necessarily, right? And if it weren't for the fact that she's reading these amendments into the record, this whole process would take 30 seconds. Well, okay, it would take about 45 to 60 seconds. There'd be a vote, and that's it. And that's all there really is to say. So for those at home that have been seeing this nonstop battle that's been going on as it relates to the minutes, here's how that should look. If you disagree with what the minutes that you're voting on are, then here's where you can make those revisions. And I'll have to go through this because I've sped up some of the middle where she's reading in her revisions. And by the way, she's making a lot of amendments here.
I have a motion to approve the special town council meeting minutes, June 7th, 2018.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
I have some corrections. Yep. Rather than they Stephanie scribble them, I typed them on her.
Okay, so pausing the video there. Did you see what Lisa Hita did? Rather than scribbling them or making them obscure, she's handed a printed copy of the revisions to Stephanie Barksdale for her to make.
Do I need to read these in for the record?
Do you see how she asks, do I have to read these into the record? As in, if she didn't have to, she wouldn't, because she knows this is a wasting of people's time otherwise.
As well? Yeah, okay. So page 3, paragraph 5.
Listing the exact...
She's okay with getting the budget as close as possible. The town has done their work. The Board of Education needs to have their feet held to the fire. The residents will not like a 3.67% increase.
So that was the passage that she's making an amendment to. She reads it out loud, and then she's going to read the amendment verbatim that she wants it to read as.
I watched the meeting video to get the statement. Ms. Hita stated she was okay with getting the budget as close as town council can and using a historical amount of unassigned. It is the right responsibility.
So then she actually reads all of her revisions, and there are a lot of revisions that she's suggesting and a lot of amendments that she's proposing. So we've kind of fast-forwarded through this.
Page 5, paragraph 6, Mrs. Hita asked. Mrs. Hita asked if the committee were to pick sections, which ones are the most economically attractive, bring people downtown, and would give us the biggest bang for our buck. She asked Mr. Shea which ones he would go after, the easiest and the most cost-effective, and his reply is in the meeting minutes.
Any other discussion or adjustments to the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And that's it. And that's the whole conversation. She says she has amendments to make. She reads them into the record. She hands a copy of the exact revisions that she wants to be made, and then they're voted on. And that's it. And that's the whole conversation. There's no vague, it's basically slandering of the recording secretary. There's no, I hate this process. It's just, here are the revisions. Vote on them. And we're done. And you'll notice that, and if you guys go back to, this is from the January 25th, 2018 meeting. It's about 21 or so minutes into the actual videos linked on YouTube, and that's where I got it from. You can go to the Town of Connecticut's YouTube channel right now and go see the June 25th, 2018 meeting where Democrat Lisa Hita proposes amendments to the minutes. She makes those amendments. She makes them clear. She says page number, paragraph number, recites the original text, recites the text that she wants to have that original text amended to, and then you vote on it. And again, she's got paper copies to hand to Stephanie Barksdale, who, if you go to the minutes from that meeting, the minutes just simply read, Lisa Hita proposed several amendments which are attached to these minutes. And that's it. And they're attached. And there they are. And that's all there is to it. At the next meeting, they're just simply attached to the minutes. That's it. And then in the next meeting, you vote on the minutes that include voting on. You vote on the minutes, which include a record of the amendments that were voted on, that were proposed by Lisa Hita in that case. That's how this whole process should go. So if you've got problems with the minutes, you propose amendments, you submit those written amendments to Stephanie Barksdale. That's it. You don't have to just be there. There's an item on the agenda, and the mayor has a letter next to his name that you don't like. So you don't have to be just nonstop antagonistic. It doesn't have to be. There's an item on the agenda. Therefore, we're going to be the antagonism. We're going to be antagonistic towards however the proverbial other side is going to be voting. It isn't. This isn't how this whole process is supposed to work. And unfortunately, I know I'm being a bit cynical in presenting that take, but the record is what the record is, and the record doesn't get better when it comes to things like I mentioned, which is the Chernisky Road Bridge project. And again, that item is on the agenda. Now, again, we'll go through just several items on the agenda so you guys can see how this whole process works. Item 4, discussion and possible action of the following appointments. There's an appointment. The mayor is going to go over his comments. There's going to be a road closure request. There's going to be Parks and Rec is going to be transferring funds from one of their accounts to another account. All of that should take however long that the mayor's comments are, plus about 2 minutes. And then we're going to get into agenda item number 8, Public Works. Discussion and possible action on the design of the permanent bridge on Chernisky Road, which takes us to the petition. Again, the link is in the comment section. So get into this petition. Get in on this petition. Let people know that you're on board with this. And we've gone through this before, but let's hammer through at least the first paragraph or so and then jump to the conclusion. Infinite money is not an appropriate limit to governmental spending on any project, much less an 18-foot-long bridge. If nothing else, New Milford's governing body, the town council, must understand that the money that is taxed from New Milford residents is not their money and should be treated far more delicately than spending hundreds of thousands and probably millions more of our money on the Chernisky Road Bridge project to cater to the whim of the loudest 5 or 6 people in the proverbial room. And this is what's going on right now. This is what's actually been going on for years. There's a reason this project is going to wind up costing millions of your dollars and not going to even break ground until next year, which will make this 6 years into the project before we've even broken ground. Now, I've talked about the history of what's been going on here, and I'll just jump straight to the conclusion so you guys get an understanding of where we're going with this petition and why I've put this petition together. Something I've never done before in my entire life, by the way. It is therefore the opinion of the here signed that it is time for the New Milford Town Council and the Department of Public Works to move forward with the bridge's design in a manner that will waste the least of our money and our time. In short, 2 lanes with, if it saves time and money, a box culvert design. It is time to end this conversation and to reject the policy of the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, a policy which only reduces to the playground rules of the biggest and most obnoxious bully gets his way. It is time to let the reason and good sense which our elected officials were elected for to prevail. It is time to let DPW do their damn jobs and build the damned bridge. In this case, with a design that is based around 2 lanes, which matches Chernisky's Road for the entirety of the rest of its miles of length, and if it's possible, if it's feasible, to use a box culvert design in a manner that would save money. Now, if it doesn't save hundreds of thousands of dollars, then maybe you do port and form. If it doesn't save us time, then maybe you do port in place. The point is, why should I even know what a box culvert design is? And their answer is because we've had endless interference into the pedantic and specific minutia of the day-to-day engineering operations over at DPW. I've talked about this, how the town council, when it comes to that type of specific pedantic minutia, when it comes to doing things like micromanaging what goes on at DPW, that is not their role. That is Jack Healy's role. And you trust Jack Healy to oversee those processes, or you don't. Or you don't. And if you don't, then you fire him. And that's it. And that's all that comes down to. In our bonus section, which I think we're going to actually have time for, that we're going to cover this concept. That, like, when it comes to these CEO level administrators, when it comes to people that are at the tippity top here, the board that is administering the top level decision making should only be making those top level decisions. And everything underneath that is a decision for the executive. In this case, it's going to be Jack Healy, DPW director, and the people that work underneath him that make these specific decisions. It should absolutely not be something that you and I, as just random taxpayers, have much of a say in terms of the specifics of the design, which, by the way, have been nonstop goalpost moving from the very beginning, right? And the result of this interference and this nonstop goalpost moving that we've talked about and we've covered on this show is that it's going to cost you, the taxpayer, hundreds of thousands of dollars more to build a 1-lane bridge than 2, and hundreds of thousands of dollars more than it would have cost if we had just gone with the original design and built the damn bridge. And built the damn bridge to basically the exact same spec that we've gotten, that we're going to get to. A 2-lane bridge is obviously safer than 1. I'm sorry, but the solution to the argument at one point was a 1-lane bridge is safer than 2 lanes because people slow down for the 1-lane bridge. First things first, no. The reason people slow down is because a 1-lane bridge is more dangerous. The solution to safety isn't danger. The solution to a concern over safety isn't the introduction of greater danger. So, no, that's obviously the reason that the state won't even certify the bridge is because if it's a 1-lane bridge, you have 2-ton hunks of steel in the same lane going in opposite directions. That's obviously more dangerous than having a 2-lane bridge where that doesn't happen. Especially when the recent complaints have been that people are speeding and they're not slowing down at the 1-lane bridge. So if they're not slowing down at the 1-lane bridge, then how could the argument that a 1-lane bridge causes people to slow down hold water if they're not slowing down? This is what I'm talking about, the goalpost movings. We've talked endlessly about increasing truck traffic. First things first, it was a dubious claim. It wasn't a false claim necessarily. It was just a dubious claim for those who are going to go home and gaslight me for the 50 millionth time, as we watched happen at the town council meeting from 2 weeks ago. happened right then and there. We showed the video that I was being gaslighted, and credit to those folks if that clip that I put out of them gaslighting me is then used to try to gaslight me again, meta gaslighting. It was a dubious claim to begin with to suggest that 18-wheelers were regularly traveling down that road. It was a dubious claim to begin with. Then the goalpost moved to, there are 18-wheelers traveling down that road. Then the goalpost moved to, there are large trucks traveling down that road. And even if there are, if that's the complaint, then you look at the weight rating of the bridge, which we already showed you. We already showed you on this show. We showed you photographs of what the weight ratings are. And those weight ratings are, and we looked this up on this show. We covered this a few weeks ago. Those weight ratings, as far as an 18-wheeler is concerned, is for an empty 18-wheeler. And there's just no possible way that the 18-wheelers going down that road are empty in both directions. It's not possible. It's not possible. And I'm sorry, but if there's an 18-wheeler headed down that road because there's a stop on that road that they're making, you kind of have to live with it. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily you kind of have to live with 18-wheelers going across that bridge, but if they're going from, say, if they're coming from the west and going towards the east, and there's a stop that they have to make along that road, and there's no way for them, because that's the destination, and there's no way for them to deliver the goods that they're delivering or to pick up the goods that they're picking up without an 18-wheeler, kind of live with it. They aren't breaking the law by going across that bridge if they're not going across that bridge. And again, dubious claim, but not necessarily false. I said, show me the evidence. And I showed you last week what the evidence was, and that presentation of evidence was spurious to say the least. And again, you guys can watch the tape on this channel. We covered this. Not to mention that if the complaint is it would be necessarily increasing truck traffic, the rationale that has been given for why 18-wheelers and big trucks are going down that road, remember, it went from 18-wheelers regularly traveling down that road to there are some large trucks going down that road. But even if that's the case, the rationale that's been offered has been they're just relying on Google Maps. Well, what's going to change? If we go from one-lane bridge to a two-lane bridge, is Google Maps going to redirect them away from that road? No. If they were sending them down that road in the first place, they're going to continue to send them down that road. So there's going to be, what expectation there would be for an increase in truck traffic is beyond me, if that's what the rationale is for those trucks going down that road. To begin with, we talked about the environmental concerns that were brought up and that were completely dismantled when Jack Healy revealed that no matter what the environmental studies reveal, it's not going to force a change in the design of the bridge. And again, the environmental concerns that were brought up in those meetings that were and at least tangentially related to the environmental studies that were being that DPW is now forced to do. We talked about how it was bats, a rare breed of bat that was potentially overnighting in the trees around the bridge. We talked about how there might be a turtle there, and there probably isn't. And let's be honest, there isn't. And if they find one, then all that's going to do is they got to make sure that they don't, it's not going to affect the design. Even if they find it, it's not going to affect the design or the construction process. It's not going to affect any of that. They talked about water flows, volume water flows, which again are not going to be affected no matter are not going to be affected by the design of this bridge. And we talked about all of that. One of the goalposts that originated was an aesthetic. It keeps up the rural charm to have a one-lane bridge on a two-lane road. If anything, the aesthetic appeal would be by having a two-lane bridge, the two-lane bridge actually then conforms to the rest of the road. For anyone who's actually been up there, and by the way, you can look this up on Google Maps now, because Google Maps is out of date and doesn't have, the bridge is closed, but the Google Maps hasn't updated what it looks like up there now that the bridge is closed. You can see what the bridge looked like before it was closed. It looks aesthetically out of place. It's two lanes, and then one lane, and then two lanes. I don't know how something that's made out of steel, concrete, and asphalt versus something that's made out of steel, concrete, and asphalt is going to affect in any way the aesthetics of a road made out of steel, concrete, and asphalt. I talked about the rural charm of a road. Whatever aesthetic value comes from driving along a roadway doesn't come from the asphalt, steel, and concrete. It comes from everything around the road, which isn't going to be affected. And we talked about that on this show. In terms of the process, in terms of things like the Scenic Road Committee, we talked about Randy DeBella showing how this process has not in any way been violative of the law, that this process hasn't skirted any element of the law, that we've gone about this in terms of process exactly the way that we're supposed to, right? We've been through all of this. We've been through every claim and debunked every single one of them. And the goalposts just move and move and move and move. We talked about last week how the goalpost has now moved to, we don't want a temporary bridge. We have problems with this temporary bridge that we're going to pull out of our rear ends, right? The real commentary here, the real lesson we're going to have to glean from all of this is, what precedent are we setting? And again, we talked about this in the last week on this show. The precedent is that we're setting here is endless goalposts moving. We're talking about a precedent that we're establishing here of millions of dollars for each and every little tiny pissant bridge in town, and half a decade or more. It's going to be more than 6 years now, because we're not even going to break ground until next year, for this little tiny 18-foot long bridge. This is the precedent we're setting. And why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Let's be honest. We know who lives there. We know who the 5 or 6 people are who have just nonstop interfered into the pedantic minutiae of day-to-day engineering at DPW. Who I have told you, the town council's role is to either hire or fire Jackie Lee, and to trust his recommendations and to trust his expertise or not. And that's it. So what is the real motivation behind all of this? What's going on here? Context for this whole thing, since we've been through all of this, is making it really hard for me to apply Hanlon's razor. It's making that really difficult. And I'm the one that gets accused for taking Hanlon's razor too far into the realm and area of naivete. But remember, we have now the context of everything that's been going on and the context surrounding other items on the agendas. And we know who these people are. I don't know how to not attribute to this to just party of antagonism continuing to go on. Finding the thing to oppose rather than carrying out business on a day-to-day basis, as has been the case through all of eternity when it comes to the processes here at town council and with our town government. So again, this is why I've gone through this length to, again, put together this petition. So if you're on board with this idea, if you don't want to have infinite money of your money spent, if you want to say enough is enough, and the precedent we're going to establish here in this meeting is that we're not doing this again, that we're not going to spend $2 million, because that's what we're going to wind up spending on this damn bridge. We're not going to spend $2 million of your money and half a decade or more on every single little culvert and pissant little tiny 18-foot bridge in town, of which we have dozens upon dozens of them. If you're in favor of all of that, if you're on board with everything I said on this show, then please do get back. Again, link is in the comment section and in this video's description. Please do go ahead and sign the petition to build the damn bridge. I'll be happy to, if I have time tomorrow, first thing in the morning, make some rounds out to folks if you want me to come to your door. But more importantly, like I said, I will be at E. Paul Martin room, setting it for town council. Last chance to get your name on the petition before Jack Healy has to make a decision, because the grants that we could be getting from the state, we have to submit those applications by April 30th, which is a Saturday. So we really have to have them submitted by April 29th, which is this Friday. It's 5 days from now. 5 days from now. And then town council meeting is tomorrow night on Monday night. So he's not going to submit it Monday night. He's going to submit it at best Tuesday morning or early afternoon, which means starting Tuesday morning, Jack Healy is going to have 3 days to submit these grant applications, or we're out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from the state. Now, if you're going to argue that the state grant money is just one hand washing the other, welcome to the Libertarian Party. I'm glad to see you've done a complete 180 on all of your takes. If your opposition, if your goalpost moving is moved into the world of libertarianism, happy to have you join the party. Stop by. Let's have a conversation and let's get you registered for the party. Because I'm glad to see that you're doing a complete 180 on the entirety of your political philosophy presented so far to date. So those are the two main things that I wanted to go over when it comes to the agenda, but that's not the end of it either. Tomorrow's town council meeting is definitely going to be one of these meetings where there's a lot of people in the room saying a lot of things. and this is gonna the other thing that's gonna be on the agenda, and this is gonna be really your last opportunity for this. My guess is gonna be your last opportunity to get your input on this. We talked about agenda item 8, Public Works. 9 is the finance report from Finance Director Greg Ossipo. And then there's number 10, ARPA funds, discussion and possible action on funds distribution for farmers and farmer education assistance. This has been an incredibly contentious topic right from the get-go. And I think there's kind of a reason for that. Now, I'll give you my thoughts on this matter real quick. I'm taking, again, the libertarian take. I have not been in favor of virtually any of the funds distributions that have taken place. I gave you the one exception, which was part of the most recent tranche of ARPA funds distribution, right? I gave you the most recent example. And in this case, I would vote against it, vote against this type of expenditure for exactly the same reason I would vote against just about everything else, right? And this is a huge part, and this is why I would vote against. My thoughts on the ARPA funds in general are a huge part of why I would vote against this one in particular. But there's also a right way to say no to this thing and also yes to other things. So if you're not going to make the libertarian argument that this should just not be taken, that these type of expenditures should not be treated the way they've been treated and it should be handled completely differently, and Mike's idea of basically finding some way to circumvent the laws that don't allow you to just write checks to the taxpayers, because that's what it is. It's just stealing your money. It's just leveraging your own investments and the investments in our future and our children. It's just taking from that and giving to government, and government gets to spend it. So again, if you're not going to make that argument and you still want to oppose this, we talked about the wrong way to oppose this. We spent an entire episode saying Republican bad for the way that they were presenting their opposition to this. And there is a right way to say no to this request and yes to all of the other requests. I can't possibly articulate it any better than the way Tony Vengrove did at I believe it was the April, looking at my calendar, April 11th town council meeting. No, I'm sorry. It was the March. I have it in my notes, so I should be looking at my notes. The March 14th, 2022 town council meeting. Tony Vengrove sums this up perfectly. So if I were to present the arguments in favor of saying no to this request and yes to all the rest of them, I would just copy and paste what Tony Vengrove had to say. It's almost 5 minutes. It's about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, but it's perfect. So go ahead, Tony.
I would like to address the farmer assistance proposal before the council tonight. First, for some background context, my experience in agriculture and food goes back to the earliest days of my career. I've held corporate director level positions in herbal supplements, smokeless tobacco, both which involved a kind of a seed to shelf product development story and required frequent engagement, research, and planning with farmers and scientists. Since starting my own consulting firm 10 years ago, I've advised several startups in agriculture, ag tech, as well as organic beverages and distilled spirits. One of the largest purchasers of Connecticut-grown grains in the state is a current client. Prior to COVID, I wrote a regular food entrepreneur column in a local magazine, hope to do that again. And I also serve on the Corporation for New Milford Economic Development, but I speak tonight as a private citizen. After the topic of the farmer's assistant proposal came up during the last 2 town council meetings, my curiosity piqued, and I requested a copy of the proposal to review more closely. The intent of the proposal states, and I quote, "To strengthen agricultural infrastructure, support the farming industry in New Milford, improve water quantity and quality, protect our environment, give rise to food grade and security, and support families in need, as well as our seniors with access to a fresh, locally grown food source." End quote.
Pause real quick. What does, folks, if you're paying attention, what does that, in your mind, think of this, what does that not include?
That's a lofty set of goals, all worthy endeavors. I totally agree, but there's a lot there. So what strikes me about this statement is that there are already multiple organizations, programs, and people currently doing great work in these areas, both locally and regionally. The agri-ecosystem is complex and highly interconnected. and that's before you bring in state and federal authorities into the picture. By the time you get to the 11 recommendations highlighted at the end of the current proposal, the areas of consideration expand to include tactics such as education programs, classes and activities, farmer demo days, farmer assistance funds, food vouchers, and more. There's some good ideas in there, but again, it's a lot. Before the town considers funding new programs and infrastructure in this area, I think it is essential to create a needs assessment to understand where redundancies exist and where gaps could be filled. I'm not talking about hiring in a big, expensive consultant. I'm talking about a local team that just kind of sits around a table and builds a document. We might conclude by that exercise that some solutions would be better addressed by scaling up existing infrastructure rather than starting from scratch. I would not approve the funding request without completing this exercise. I think the proposal as it stands is way too broad, not nearly focused enough, and suffers from everything but the kitchen sink syndrome. With a requested budget of $150,000, I think many of us recognize these funds would be spread too thin if allocated as currently proposed. The budget conversation also brings into question how will the new programs and infrastructure birthed by this proposal be funded beyond their initial funding stage? Will the town be required to fund them? Will nonprofits take on some of the responsibilities? Will grants be pursued? How will they be sustainable? Or is the idea just to fund short-term one-time projects? Also, who will do the work to create all the programming classes and so forth? At the last two council meetings, I heard some members request that they would like to hear from additional farmers about the proposal and their specific needs. I'm first up, so there might be some that come to the podium tonight. But it does seem to me that a large coalition of farmers and other groups in agriculture has not been built to date around the opportunity. And that begs the question, why for me? I spoke to a few local farmers myself who told me they are actually doing well, that the COVID years have reinvigorated their businesses. That doesn't mean there aren't opportunities and improvements to make, of course, but it seems to me there isn't a local farming crisis that is in dire need of attention. I think the council should also clarify what role Mr. Carwanta wants to play in all of this, if any. Does he want to be a member of the proposed committee? He brought the proposal forward, but his desired role is unclear to me. So in conclusion, I don't believe the proposal is ready for a vote tonight. And to be honest, I'm of the opinion that the council should consider taking a time out from allocating the remaining ARPA funds. With all the rapid and disconcerting changes happening in the world right now, I think it would be prudent to keep some funds available to ensure financial agility so that we can respond quickly to yet to be identified community needs. And for the proponents of the farm proposal, this would buy you time to re-engineer a document that is received, at least by me, as more focused, strategic, and feasible. Thank you.
So everything Tony Van Grove said is dead on. Excuse me, I have to get something else brought up really. Okay. Everything he said is dead on. This thing is way too broad. Remember how I interjected here when I said pause about how what does this not include? Again, I don't know what this would not include. This sounds to me more like here's money for farmers. Just farmers can make any request for anything, even if it's only tangentially related to farming. And this is a legitimate concern. Because if that's the case, then what should really be happening is the individual farmers who are making these requests, since the topic is so broad and vague, should be going directly to town council to say, I need a new attachment for my tractor, and it's going to cost me $20,000. I need a new hopper for the back of my tractor because I need fertilizer to spread, right, for the grain that I'm growing, right? And the new hopper is going to be $5,000 just for the hopper, let alone the distributor in the back, let alone the attachments I'm going to need to get the hopper connected to the tractor. If it was significantly more specific in scope, then you could say maybe there's a rationale for doing this sort of thing to the tune of $150,000. And maybe that extremely narrow scope is offering, say, like adult ed when it comes to agronomy, when it comes to these agricultural courses that you're not really likely to get by the time you're an adult, by the time it's too late to go to places like Nonawag High School, and where maybe there's certain courses of study that you can get at Abbott Tech, but they're tiny sections of a much larger course of study, like with welding, right? Farmers need to know how to weld. I'm sorry, if you're a farmer and you don't know how to weld, and you're trying to be a large scale farm, it's just you're just doing it wrong. right? So you need to learn how to weld. Almost every farmer in town has to be able to work with has to be able to do repairs to their own equipment, because that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to running a large scale farm. In that case, it's good to have that mechanical background, but you're not going to go to Henrietta Tech and study 4 years of mechanics. What you really need is like a semester or two of farm mechanics or small engine mechanics. What you really need in terms of farming, instead of an entire 4-year course of study on welding, is just the basics of welding so that you can make repairs to your equipment. When it comes to, the agricultural side of things, maybe you don't need an entire course of a field of study for something like putting together, a 150 tree apple orchard, right? Or maybe doing something like owning some bovine when that's the only part of the agricultural side of things that you're doing, right? Or maybe you're growing corn to produce grain for the other farms. Maybe you've got, say, 500 acres of just corn that you're growing. Well, that's only one crop species. So maybe you don't need to go to Nanawag for these sort of things. Or maybe even more specifically, there are certain things when it comes to agronomy that have licensure associated with them. And in order to get that licensure, it's much more helpful to have, at the very least, preparatory courses, right? And you're going to have that $150,000 be the seed money for what isn't really a school, but kind of an educational program, a sort of an adult ed blend program, even if it's just going to be for things like getting folks licensed in forestry. I think it's a class 7 license. I know that it's 3A for turf and ornamental supervisory license. That's an incredibly difficult test to pass, and it's an incredibly difficult license to get. And it's one of those licenses that I've got 5 phone numbers I can give you right now, where if you have that license right now, you're guaranteed $85 a year and probably never breaking a sweat ever again in your entire life if you have that license. But it's a tough test to pass. So it would be nice if you have the background to begin with to have something like an SAT prep course, or, the 3A or the 3B or the grade 4 or grade 7 test to get all of this licensure that allows you to have these jobs broadly in that field. If that was the specifics of the scope, just the education side of things, just the licensure side of things, or, again, just narrowly focusing on these courses of study that you could do in a semester, that you could do in a few weeks, or in terms of, a test prep course you could do in a day, right? And then at the end of the day, you go home and you hurry up and you take that test while that material is still on your mind, right? If you had that, then it might make sense to have that $150,000 go towards seeding that group, towards seeding that sort of thing. But it's impossible to say what this doesn't include. That's part of the word definition. What is a definition if it doesn't define, if it doesn't create a boundary between what is the thing and what isn't the thing, right? So the thing so in this case, the proposal is way too broad, and Tony Van Grove is 100% correct in the way that he presents all of that. The other thing he does mention at the end is Joe Quanter's role, and, I'll say the difficult thing. I'll say the thing that everybody wants me to say, but, I'm going to just say it. I'm just going to say this about Joe. He's kind of irreparably damaged his own reputation in town, and we're going to leave it at that. And quite frankly, if the group of people that wanted this thing to actually come to fruition and come to pass, maybe you have somebody else just stand in for Joe to make these presentations so that there isn't the air of the tarnish of his reputation that comes with that presentation. There isn't that black smudge that comes with that presentation that puts a sour taste in the mouths of the people that you're presenting to. I talked about knowing your place last week, right? I talked about introspection last week. And to me, there are a number of people that this group could have reached out to that are not only better at organizing this presentation, but also making the presentation so that it's not 12 and a half minutes during during public comment, but instead sticks to the 5 minutes of public comment and isn't pages and pages and pages and pages of extremely broad, vague, and unclear text for $150,000. And the name that I can think of right now would be, I can name a number of names, but there's a number of names I could have named that would have been better at presenting this. Lisa Hita would have been one of them. There's some other farmers in town that you could have gone to instead to present that wouldn't have that air that comes along with, unfortunately, Joe has, again, tarnished his own reputation with. I'm trying to think of his name. I should have written his name down. Excuse me, folks. Yeah. So anyway, I'll come back. There's other people that could have presented to that, and that's how you kind of avoid the. And it was wrong for town council to do this, but this is how you avoid the. We want to wait for somebody else. We want to hear from real farmers. So that's basically where I'm going to leave that. Tony Vengrove, perfect comments on that sort of thing. Again, there's two ways to vote no on this matter. One is you take the libertarian approach that I take, which is I'm just not voting in favor of virtually any of the ARPA funds distributions going on, which Tony actually alluded to towards the end there. Or two, you take Tony's approach and say, man, this thing is so broad and it's unclear what it both would and wouldn't go to. And for only $150,000, if it's just supposed to be for everything, then what the farmer should be doing is going to town council and making these requests directly. Okay, so we're closing in on our hour-long show. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and cover a topic that I really don't like. It's only just come up, so I really hate covering this topic, and that is the petition to have Alicia DeCorpo no longer be superintendent. Before we get to that real quick, I just want to let folks know about what's coming up. First things first, of course, there's the petition that I've been talking about when it comes to Chernisky Road. Link is in the comments and in this video's description. Check it out. Please do sign it. If you want to, it'll be more effective to get your name on the handwritten, on the paper version of this petition, to get the town council to instruct DPW Director Jack Healy to build the damn bridge and not waste any more time or any more of your money to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars and, well, build the damn bridge. So that link is in this video's description. I'll be at the E. Paul Martin room setting up for tomorrow night's town council meeting all day. So if you want to sign the in-person one, on paper version, that's the place to find me. I'll be there at least during the afternoon. On May 4th is the GOP state convention for nominating the 2022 candidates. So I've reached out to some folks that are probably going to be nominated. Excuse me. And hopefully we'll be able to have them on the show. I will be at Goat Days, which is going to be going on in just a few weeks. That's May 21st and May 22nd with the Lions Club. We'll be I'll commit to it. The Lions will be bringing out their Lions train for the kids to ride on. And you guys are going to love that event and love that show. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Now, I haven't read everything, and this is breaking news. And I hate covering breaking news because I have no way to get the information on these sort of things without actually doing the research necessary to get that information on these sort of things. And therefore, I don't like providing commentary on it. And in fact, I don't like even covering these topics unless I can be extremely well informed on this one. But since this is breaking now, let's do our best to at least talk about what's going on with this petition. And maybe we can have at least some element of an opinion formed from it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to commit to anything tonight. Because again, I'm doing the research right in front of you right now on the fly. So this is the first post that I saw that had any that pertained in any way to this. Yeah, it's really small font. So let's go ahead and make this as big as I can. Here, let's zoom in on this. This is the first post. It's been, as far as I can tell, deleted. That's why you can't see any commentary on this thing. But I'll read the post, and then it contains a link to a petition that a lot of people have signed, and we'll read the petition. I'm going to probably go Ben Shapiro speed on some of this, just so we can get through this quickly. Even if this is from Danielle Thompson and the New Milford, Connecticut public page, even if you don't have a child in the high school, please read this and join together Saving Our Schools principle. This is outrageous, and the superintendent needs to be stopped. Ray Manka, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his last name. Folks in the chat, let me know if I'm mispronouncing it and try your best to spell it phonetically for me. Ray Manka is the kind of principal every school deserves. He is the kind of principal our kids deserve. He genuinely cares about all of his students. He supports all of them every day. The students love him. They see him excited about school spirit and about being involved in the community. You won't find a better man for the job. Please take a moment and sign this petition to keep him in our school, to keep him as a positive role model for our teenagers. This would be a huge loss for our kids and our community. Okay, so this is being framed as a way to save New Milford High School principal Ray Manka. So let's go to the petition that this link takes us to. calling for the termination or resignation of Superintendent DeCorpo. Wow. How about that framing, folks? There's 1,610 people that have signed, and since it's ongoing, let's go ahead and refresh the page to see exactly how many people have signed. 1,623 people. So 13 people in less than the last hour since I last refreshed this have signed on. Let's read the actual petition. Started by Brendan Farina. To the New Milford Board of Education, we, the undersigned parents of children who are attending or who have attended New Milford Public Schools and community members who share similar concerns, have composed this letter to express our dissatisfaction and vote of no confidence with the current superintendent, Alicia DeCorpo. For the record, the Board of Education does not have to pass a vote of no confidence on the current superintendent. They can simply vote to terminate her. They can do that. So a vote of no confidence isn't necessary. It can just be simply a vote to terminate the current superintendent. Chances are the discussion for that vote would be happening in executive session while nobody's in the room, so that because we're talking basically about an employment negotiation. So it would be creating a material advantage for that. The material advantages in terms of negotiation is why they wouldn't have anybody in the room, and then they would present the decision towards the end. And if there was conversation to be had about the decision afterwards, that's when they would have that conversation. The undersigned petitioners believe that the superintendent has acted inefficiently, incompetently, and is a detriment to the New Milford public school system. Folks, let me know if you need me to zoom in on this so you guys can follow along. Based on the reasons below, we, the undersigned, are asking for a vote of no confidence in Ms. DeCorpo and her ability to successfully oversee the New Milford public school system, and request that she resign or be let go effective immediately. So this is calling for her termination, and here's why. Firstly, during Ms. DeCorpo's 18-month tenure, we have lost Director of Facilities, IT Director, HR Director, New Milford High School Principal, Schaghticoke Middle School Principal, Interim Assistant Superintendent, Interim SMS Principal, SMS Assistant Principal number 1, Schaghticoke Middle School, SMS Assistant Principal number 2, NMHS Principal number 2. Many of these positions have left mid-year. This is not typical nor standard and is completely unacceptable. Our district is losing qualified and experienced staff. After the difficulties we have experienced during COVID and so many leadership positions leaving, our community cannot recover and see positive change in our education system. It is also imperative that during this time of ever-changing fluidity, with the highest rate of mental illness, that our children not only have role models of good faith, but work ethic as well, which is impossible if our administrators and leaders are running away or being forced out by Alicia DeCorpo. Those are some lofty accusations. Secondly, the Connecticut Board of Education mandates that it is the legal responsibility of the district's Board of Education to provide transportation. In addition, the New Milford Board of Education bylaws state that the superintendent is the chief executive officer of the board. As such, Ms. DeCorpo has completely failed in her legal duty. Wow, okay, now this is a serious claim. Quote, 11, provisions for reasonable and desirable student transportation to school, including students attending charter schools and magnet schools, to state vocational and state vocational agricultural, and equivalent transportation for students in grades K through 12 attending non-public, non-profit schools within school district boundaries, when majority of the students attending the non-profit, non-public schools are residents of Connecticut. This is unacceptable, end quote. This is unacceptable for the hardworking people of New Milford who are going to work late or having to make inconvenient, costly accommodations for their children. Whereas yet, the very same people who are making accommodations where the administration has failed are also being ignored when they reach out for information. So I'm going to interject here, just real quick. If she wasn't superintendent, who would the superintendent be? And how would they have performed differently? What is the expectation in her stead? The New Milford Board of Education bylaws also state that it will, quote, seek to facilitate ongoing communication between the board and students, staff, parents, and all elements of the community, end quote. Once again, as the chief executive officer, de facto chief executive officer, Alicia DeCorpo has completely neglected many of her duties as the superintendent. One of the finest examples of the neglect of her duties is when the district rolled out Power School and she removed her email from the website. In addition, it is literally impossible to leave a message for the superintendent as she does not have an extension listed, and if you do not know that Pat is her secretary, one would not know to leave a message with her voicemail. As the head of the Milford Public Schools, that is complete neglect of duty, cowardice, and not reflective of this community's values. As if to add insult to injury, it appears that Mr. Corpo only feels obligated to respond when there are others carbon copied on an email, particularly when the other person replies first. In fairness, I would imagine that Mr. Corpo's email inbox is full every morning. The Board of Education bylaws also state that the board will do what is right rather than what is popular. It also states that the, quote, goal is to improve the education of our children and advocate for them in their best interests. Board members must be working effectively together and with others in the community to successfully reach this goal, end quote. In her 18 months as superintendent, we have lost 10 administrative positions. Mr. Corpo has completely failed in her legal duties to provide transportation for some students and has completely neglected her responsibility to the students and community. Mr. Corpo has proven that she is unfit, incompetent, and has displayed dereliction of duties to our district. Alicia DeCorpo is not the right fit to this community. It is for these reasons that the community is asking for the board to dismiss Miss Alicia DeCorpo or that she resigns of her own accord. If the board fails to act on the community's request as elected officials, the community will reach out to the state and seek dissolvement of the board. Wow. Okay. So we might actually have to pull out Notepad and take some notes. So let me go ahead and do that. So we're calling for the termination of Alicia DeCorpo. We are calling for the state to dissolve the board. If that doesn't happen, and we are suggesting that she has violated the law. And that primarily we're talking about transportation duties in terms of the specific violations of those laws and specific dereliction of duty. So that's the entire petition. Quite frankly, if I might interject, on the petition itself, there's a reason that there has been some pushback on this when it comes to Facebook, and why I am on board with some of the things that people have said on Facebook that I would never, ever agree with. So first things first, we're talking about the termination of a superintendent. To me, if you're going to ask for somebody's job, if you're going to ask that they no longer have the means by which they could, I don't know if Alicia has any kids, but feed her children, I need to have a ridiculously high bar. As a man, if you're a man and you're signing on to this petition, and I will appeal to masculinity here, if you're a man, you don't ask for another man's job. Not without huge cause. And the fact that Alicia DeCorpo is not a man in this case doesn't change the calculus on this matter. So I'm not saying that the bar hasn't necessarily been met, but I need a massive, massive bar. Like this is an off the charts bar to ask for somebody's job. If you're going to get me to sign this petition, then I need a lot. I need major dereliction of duty. Yes, there's been some pretty high turnover. I'll also point out, if I might interject, that turnover long predated Alicia DeCorpo. And I'll also point out that there was endless turnover. It was a meme for years before Alicia DeCorpo was brought into the position of superintendent, that the superintendent was just going to be some outsider that was going to take the money for 6 months and then leave. It was a revolving door. It was a revolving goddamn door at that position until she took over. Nobody before her had a real vested interest in the community, and therefore they just disappeared after 6 months. That's why in the course of something like 3 years, we had 4 superintendents before she signed on. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a reason to laud her, but remember that question I asked. If she's not going to be there, now we're going beyond the moral claim. Now we're going beyond the moral and ethical consideration, right? Now we're going into the practical. If she's not going to be there, who is? And this is a serious question to ask, even in context, because the history that we've seen is that the answer is nobody. The answer is that if you're going to have a revolving door in that position, then you don't have that position. Is she worse than nobody? Is she worse than the revolving door that we saw before her? This is a very serious question to ask. And I think if I'm going to be on board with calling for someone's job, then not only do I need to meet that incredibly high bar, I'm comparing her being in that position to nobody being in that position, because that's basically what we're going to be faced with. And quite frankly, I have a feeling that this doesn't have to do with money. I have a feeling that these revolving doors that predate Alicia DeCorpo, not only in that position, but in a number of administrative positions and in the teaching positions, the revolving door of employment within the New Milford Public Schools doesn't have necessarily to do with money, because it's been the same dollar amount, and Alicia DeCorpo's been there for years now, and everyone else was just leaving right away. And it might be that revolving door that's causing people at the higher ends to just leave, right? So the other thing to point out here is I really hope that, since we're talking about the transportation duties, I really hope that's not the only reason. I really hope that's not the only rationale. Because it's her job to basically negotiate the contracts with the transportation companies that have the licensure and legal authority to actually do what they do. And unfortunately for us, there's one company in town that can do it. One. First Student, that's it. I don't even know who the other options are across the state. But there's a reason that we sign these contracts with these bus companies that we do. And that's unfortunately because what other option do we have? Right? Who is she supposed to go to to serve these transportation needs? And if First Student isn't providing adequate transportation, and I would need some real metrics on that matter, then like what is she supposed to do? Where is her fault in this agreement? Should she have not signed that agreement and gone with nobody? Because from what I can tell of things, that's where we would be, with nobody. Now, as the crazy libertarian in the room, I'm completely in agreement with the folks on Facebook who have been saying, hey, this is what we've been talking about with homeschooling. This is what we've been talking about with public schools. I don't think that the problems that this bus company has experienced are not a reflection of what's been happening across the state. Every bus company can't find bus drivers. Every one of them. And there's reasons for that go beyond money. Absolutely. There's something I can't talk about, right? There's something I can't talk about because we're streaming to YouTube and Facebook where they have an editorial standard. But there's a certain thing that doesn't have to do with money, which is why so many people won't take these new jobs and left in the first place, and why these vacancies are there in the first place. It doesn't count for all of them, but it counts for a good chunk, right? So not only are we talking about termination of Alicia DeCorpo, but if we're talking about going over the head of the Board of Education here in New Milford and having the state step in, wow, is that a high bar? Wow, is that a high bar? This to me sounds like hijacking. Like, first things first, I can't get on board with this petition as is, just because I would need a lot more information, number one, and number two, I would need that information to pile up in favor of one side of this discussion. Maybe that information exists, I'm not seeing it, right? So I would need a lot more information and would have to stack up very heavily in favor of one thing. And quite frankly, in terms of dissolving the Board of Education over this decision, the word petty comes to mind. And let me talk about petty, right? What would petty be? I was, as you guys know, the contractor. My company, Taylor Media, was the contractor that was at one point handling the live broadcast and recordings and the distribution of the Board of Education's meetings for about half a year. And then that relationship was severed. And that relationship was severed almost entirely by Ms. DeCorpo. Now, quite frankly, considering how little our contract was and how little that agreement amounted to and what was involved with all that, she should not be wasting any more than 30 seconds of her time on that decision. And if 30 seconds of her time on that decision was, no longer Mike, we're going to hire somebody else. Fine. You know what would be incredibly petty of me? To say, I know I can provide a better service. I can prove I can provide a better service. I have been providing a better service than what you're getting, and for less money. And I know that this was motivated by something other than most efficient, fulfillment of her duties as superintendent. I could say that, but why would I? Why would I? This is business. I don't care what her decision was. Her decision was to go someone else, and you move on. It would be incredibly petty of me to be jumping on board with this because of whatever personal or business disagreements she and I have had. And it's a question if we've even really had a disagreement on this matter. So that's what comes to mind when we have all of this conversation. That instead of going through the normal channels and seeing if the people who were elected into these positions, in many cases in landslides, in many cases the people that are serving on the Board of Education were elected in, statement election years, right? Like statement election years. And I'll go so far as to even name a Democrat. Tom O'Brien was elected into that position with something like 1,000 more votes than any other Democrat running in that year. That's a statement election, right? The Republicans that were elected in 2021 were elected almost 2-1 at every spot except for Tom O'Brien, who still lost by over 1,000 votes to the Republicans in the room. That's a statement election. So to me, if you guys think that if the Board of Education genuinely, honestly makes a good faith decision to retain her, then it is kind of a disgusting take to have to then overturn the result of a vote that happened less than 6 months ago, right? Or just about 6 months ago, to have the superordinate governing body come in and take over the local body, right? This whole country was founded on the notion of devolution of authority. That's why we vote. That's why we have votes, because the individuals have that decision-making when it comes to these elected officials has been devolved to the least common denominator, which is the individual. So, again, if we're talking about the dissolvement of the board, that's a much higher standard. And on top of that, I would say that if we're going to talk about dissolving of the board, the decision should be made first, and then you talk about dissolving of the board. Then you talk about why they made the decision that they made. Then we talk about why it is that this principal has left New Milford Public Schools. It seems to be as the result of resignation. So let's talk to him. And in fact, what was his name? Principal Ray Manka. If anyone knows Ray Manka, if anyone knows the former principal of New Milford High School, or if he's watching, I'd love to have you on the show to get your thoughts on this whole situation. Why was it that you departed? Let's get your take on this matter. And we're not getting that from this petition, but we are getting endless commentary. So let's go over some of your folks' commentary when it comes to this petition. Again, I'm trying to get more information. I'm not presenting a decision yet, right? Like the a priori position, not the a priori position. The null hypothesis is that I don't sign the petition, because if the petition doesn't exist, of course I don't sign it. I can't sign it until it exists. Then it exists, and then the decision is, do I sign it? So the hypothesis that needs to be proved is that I should sign it, not that I shouldn't sign it because I already haven't, right? That's Russell's Teapot. We've talked about this on this channel. So let's go into some more conversation on this matter. Maybe I could be convinced. I don't know. Calling for the termination or resignation of Superintendent DeCorpo, which was shared by Aidan Cole, again, to this public New Milford, Connecticut page just a few days ago. We can go into, Christina Owen's defense of Superintendent DeCorpo, and I'd love to get into the commentary in just a minute here, but let's read what she has to say. Superintendent DeCorpo does not deserve to be slandered and used as a scapegoat. She was handed an unbelievably difficult situation to try and mend. Fair. Should she have been able to mend it? What's a reasonable expectation for her in terms of mending it? That doesn't happen overnight, and all of you whining that she should be able to, quote, fix the bus issue, end quote, or she's, quote, the reason all the good teachers leave, end quote. She's not in charge of the bus company. So how is she supposed to force them to keep bus drivers or keep up with turnover in that company? Fair question. And the teachers leaving, they are allowed to. So what if they were your favorite teacher? That seems a bit dismissive. They are allowed to come and go as they please. And if some get terminated, there's a reason for that. In fairness, that's true. That's true. The union contracts make it virtually impossible to fire somebody for cause at New Milford Public Schools. So if they get terminated, they screwed up bad. All you entitled Karens need to sit down and STFU. Unless you want to get a job at the bus company or go back to school to become an educator and be a solution to the issue, shut up and sit down. You aren't fixing the problem by blaming our superintendent for something she literally has no control over. Again, this is fair commentary. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scroll through some of the commentary. The first link I showed you folks, I'm not going to be able to go scroll through the commentary because it doesn't exist. It seems like somebody deleted that post. Okay, so let's just go to the comments that have gotten kind of a lot of responses on this matter. Where's Reed's comment? Oh, that's too bad. Reed's comment got deleted by the other post getting deleted. So let's read the responses from Christina Owen's defense. I really like this one from Ricardo Lathers, who I usually like, whose responses are usually like anyways. If we got rid of schools and parents taught their kids most likely doing a better job at it, also, we wouldn't have these issues. Defund schools, but then again, parents teaching kids that can't even navigate a roundabout doesn't sound so well. So, yeah, again, this is kind of the case that I've been making, the libertarian case that I've been making for homeschooling and the weaknesses of public schooling in general. Here's another response that could be the case, but again, I need to see evidence of that fact. Jean Marie, or maybe she has control over situations and is making poor decisions. Again, this is fair. This is fair. But if she's making those poor decisions, number one, it has to amount to a pretty high standard before someone else calls for her termination. If I have an employee and I want to terminate them in landscaping, I just terminate them. Done. It's over with. Not much thought put in the matter. It was your first day of work and you showed up 2 hours late. Goodbye. You're fired. Right? Or it was your second day of work and you called in sick. And it was your third day of work and you came in 2 hours late and you clearly weren't sick. I saw you driving around. I saw you at O'Connor's last night. You're fired. Goodbye. Or, you show up to work high. Sorry, you're fired. But from the outside looking in, you don't ask for someone else's job unless you've met a colossal threshold. And honestly, I don't know if we have actually met that threshold. 73 likes and hearts. This is from Heidi Price. Here's the thing, Christina. When you take on a role like that, she is basically the manager or CEO of her company. Her job is to have skilled, competent employees, foster a good, healthy work environment, mitigate turnover, produce results. Actually, that's like her only job. In this case, successful, academically nourished children, and subsequently make her clients or customers, in this case, the parents, no, in this case, the taxpayers, are pleased with the above. No, the people paying the bill are the taxpayers. Those are the customers. I mean, let's be real. Our education system is just that, a business these days. Well, it doesn't run like one at all, but go ahead. In any other field, she would be fired by now for literally not checking any of these boxes. Again, I want to know how that's the case, right? What exactly has been taking place? Maybe I'm uninformed. Inform me. She has administrators leaving repeatedly. Again, this turnover predates her, including ones that saw the future of their careers here in New Milford till retirement because they aren't given the support they need, whatever that means. So let me know what that means. She has unruly kids that are not being disciplined in appropriate manners. It's 2022. No one's being disciplined in appropriate manners, in my opinion. And she has a community, not one or two bitching Karens, that feel she is failing their children. And while the bus problems aren't directly related to she personally, aka drivers, to her personally, aka driver shortages, the lack of timely communication is something she should be in control of. The fact that we were short bus drivers and borrowing from other districts that have their S together pre-pandemic is her problem to fix. She is at the helm of this ship. She should be guiding it versus sinking it. I think over 1,500 signatures on a petition speaks volumes as to the lack of leadership in our district and the the decline and decay of our school district that people are sick of. Okay, we actually have to speak to that last part. 1,500 signatures on a petition. How many signatures go the other way? Where's the petition to keep Superintendent DeCorpo? How many people think this is a way overreaching the issue? How many people are seeing only this side of the discussion and saying, yeah, I'm on board because I'm only seeing this side of the conversation? This is squeakiest wheel gets the grease policy, and I reject it entirely, and so should you. Squeakiest wheel policy is whoever comes and presents versus whoever isn't there to come and present. We're only going to hear they're going to be the squeakiest wheel, so they get the thing. That's just not how this should work. What that results in, what that will always decay to, what that will always dissolve into is playground rules where the biggest, most obnoxious bully in the room gets his, her, or their way. And that's just not the way this should be done. Remember what I keep saying about how our elected officials in town are elected ostensibly on value judgment. They shouldn't be elected to be held hostage by what could well be a minority. 1,500 voters. If you got 1,500 votes for town council in 2021, you were nowhere near getting elected. You were dead last place by a lot in what was a statement year election. So perhaps there are 3,500 other people going the other way on this, but there's no way to know that. There's no way to capture that in this petition. All that we're getting is a lot of people who have chimed in to say one side of the story and not a whole lot the other way. Jeffrey Rundini, she should be let go immediately. And then, okay, so I think this is actually in favor of her staying. Michelle Conley Fisher, very mature, and I'm not sure, but I don't believe people were complaining about their favorite teacher leaving. I think everyone understands they're allowed to leave, but there have been several administrators leaving under her watch than ever before. So I guess this is sarcasm. I guess this is not in defense of Alicia DeCorpo. So again, I'm just going basically to the most liked comments because they, this is at least giving some insight to the thing. Okay, here we go. Now as we get down the comment section, we get to some more defenses of Alicia DeCorpo. Michael, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Eastern European names. Modern day witch trials. There's no proof that she's at fault for all of the issues with transportation and retention, but that doesn't prove anything, so we should just get rid of her. Don't know what that face means. Melanie, again, Eastern European last name. Sorry, folks, I can't pronounce them. Ilichvink. Sorry, I'm going to screw it up. I am not surprised that a town full of people who complain yearly about how much we budget for the BOE are now complaining because teachers and admin are leaving for better jobs. Again, this idea that money resolves all problems and that the only decision making that's going on here is how much do I get paid, and if I make $1 more, I'm moving across the country. That's just not a reflection of reality when it comes to decisions relating to taking on jobs. There were some other comments I wanted to get into here. Unfortunately, okay. So here's another one in defense of DeCorpo. Again, I'm not cherry picking the ones that are in defense of her. It's just we've gotten a lot going one way, so I'm trying to pick through all of this stuff. John Krapinski, all the parents sitting home complaining should take one day of driving the bus, and the problem would be solved. Fair. Actually, that's kind of fair. Peter Smith, John Krapinski, that's a great idea. I have friends in North Carolina whose school district has paras drive the buses. Way to catch up with solutions. See, now, this is something I actually like because instead of complaining, and you guys have seen me speak at town council before, I don't like to complain when I don't have a solution. And this seems to me to be, even if it's being presented sarcastically, I'm on board. Let's reduce the licensure requirements to become a bus driver, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to become a bus driver. Okay, so we have a factual claim. Okay, no, this is not really what we're going for. Let's see. This one has 8. This one has 8 likes. So let's see what Dan Bremen has to say. Instead of worrying about buses, y'all should be worried about the children in this school district. Seems like a large portion of youth have suicidal tendencies and beginning stages of chemical dependencies before stepping foot in high school. But hey, let's blame the buses and superintendent for that. But hey, I'll STF you now and continue to ignore the elephant in the room. By the way, whoever posted should really avoid using coin terms like Karen. Makes your argument a bit harder to agree with when you sound like a preteen throwing a temper tantrum. There's something actually to this, right? Like the single best predictor, we've gone over the data on the show. I have an entire video on this matter. The single best predictor for educational outcomes in public schools K through 12 by far is parental involvement, right? And that the conditions which affect educational outcomes greatest extend way beyond the four walls of the classroom and well into the home. We've talked about this on this channel. There is something to the idea that a lot of these problems that are probably larger problems aren't even happening though they're happening among school-age children, aren't really happening as a result of what's happening in school, but what's happening in the home. So that is a fair point to bring up. Let's see what you guys have had to say in the commentary. Thanks for everyone who's been joining in. Wow. Okay. So I guess I have to zoom out so I can actually read what's going on here. Okay, Ray Lillis is late to the party, but he's here as always. Thanks, Ray, for watching. Paul Murphy's watching. Thanks, Paul, for watching. Walter O'Connor. In case you don't get to it, Superintendent DeCorpo is the best of the last 5 superintendents I interacted with. So folks know at home, Walter O'Connor is the director of the Board of Finance, so he interacts with the superintendent of schools on a very regular basis, especially when it comes to building the budget, so that he stays well informed and apprised of everything going on. Danny C. Facts. Rebecca Rebillard, which... God, I'm so bad at pronouncing last names. Sorry, folks. There's a lot of districts looking for superintendents this year. It would be hard to fill. Ray Lillis, at least hold the bus company accountable. Fair. I'm not sure what that means or how you would go about that, but fair. Danny C., are they even New Milford residents? I think based on the names I'm seeing that these people that are complaining and are putting this together are New Milford residents. As far as the petition itself is concerned, it's impossible to say who's been signing it are a bunch of New Milford residents, largely because with the online version of these petitions, which is why I have on paper versions, which, have, names and addresses so that you can see that they're from New Milford. And that's why I do that. There is a way in the online version of these petitions, especially in change.org, to have anonymous signatories of these petitions. Okay, so this is from Karen. I am so bad at pronouncing names. I'm so sorry, folks. This is from Karen Muir Lima. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing names. Hey, I'm Karen, and I've been saying this all along. I don't know why everyone thinks they can handle and do everyone else's job better, and all they do is sit around and complain about the ones who are trying to do their jobs. My favorite Karen has spoken. It's funny that her name is Karen in this situation. So this seems to be in defense of Alicia DeCorpo. Come to the Board of Ed. Kelly Ryan Murphy, come to the Board of Ed meeting Tuesday, 426 Sarah Noble School. Yeah, so Tuesday night there is going to be a Board of Education meeting at Sarah Noble in the library, as they always hold their meetings. I don't know that we're really going to get more information on this issue. It seems to me, okay, here we go. Here's Walter O'Connor's commentary. I was actually looking for this. Walter O'Connor, as a member of the Board of Finance, I've interacted with the Board of Education and at least 5 superintendents over the last 6 years. Our current superintendent has been by far the best one. Anthony Pearburn responded, one can be both pleasant during interactions and incompetent in day-to-day activities. Fair. Anthony, that is a fair response. And again, I might be ill-informed on all this matter. The only thing that I'm going to say as we kind of wrap things up here, because we're getting way over on time. First things first, thanks for everyone who's joined in. I'd love to get everybody's thoughts on this matter. I'd love to get the former principal of New Milford High School, Ray Manka, on. If anyone knows him, please reach out to him. Please give him my information here on Mike Sennello's show, and have him reach out to me. I'd love to hear his take on why he left. It seems to have been a resignation rather than a termination. I can't say one or the other for sure. If that's the case, seems to be the case. Again, I can't sign this petition right now. I just can't. We're not only calling for somebody's job, we're doing it on kind of limited grounds here. We're not saying we're not saying something along the lines of checks aren't getting caught for the teachers, right? We're not saying something along the lines of, the superintendent shredded the transportation contract and spent 6 months sitting on her hands while there was no way to get kids to school in any reasonable manner, right? It isn't anything that serious. It isn't, some sort of major violation of the law necessarily, like diddling kids, let's say, God forbid. But again, we're asking for somebody's termination. And we're not just asking for somebody's termination. We're asking for a very high-ranking official's termination. We're asking for the Board of Education superintendent, we're at New Milford Public Schools superintendent, Alicia DeCorpo's, either resignation or termination by the Board of Ed. And on top of that, we're asking for basically the dissolution of the Board of Education if they don't terminate her on Tuesday night. That seems insane. That seems, again, like what we're looking at here is not a rational response to what might be going on. For all those folks who have been saying that SMS is an S show, By the way, because I've seen some of that commentary, Schaghticoke Middle School has always been an S show. I last attended Schaghticoke Middle School in the 90s. In the 90s, Schaghticoke Middle School was an S show. And that's because the kids of that age group are bastards. Quite frankly, I know because I was one. I know because I was there. Right? And that's been the case for 30 years. So if we're going to say that SMS is a S show, then we need way more information than that. We need exact specifics as to what makes this S show, and especially S show, compared to prior years. I want to know, when we've had 2 years of COVID, where we've had the state constantly changing things like masking policy and constantly changing things like what are the conditions that allow for kids to be in the classroom versus not, constantly changing vaccination policy for both the teachers and the visitors and the parents and the students. When we have things like regulation coming from outside of Alicia's control, just constantly changing things. When we constantly have turnover in the IT department because of, I'll say it, I've talked to one of the IT directors and why they were leaving. A lot of them were saying that their emails were just constantly being bombarded by utterly ridiculous requests from parents who just have no patience whatsoever and have no capacity to understand that when it comes especially to IT, things like going from entirely in-person student classrooms to entirely virtual classrooms in 3 days, you're not going to like the result. Period. When the state comes in and says you have to go virtual, you have to shut down, it's going to take a year to replace that. It's going to take a year of everybody stay home, homeschool your kids while we figure this out, to go from nothing to fully virtual in a way that's actually going to result in real learning, in a way that's going to actually allow for parents to find some way to manage the daily, day-to-day care of their kids. This is a garbage situation to walk into. And yes, Alicia DeCorpo did walk into it. And yes, it's her job to walk into these garbage dumpster fire situations, the New York Jets of the last 20 years, right? And fix those problems. What is a reasonable expectation of outcomes in that situation? What is a reasonable expectation of what things should look like now versus if somebody else was in her stead? How would somebody else have done things differently that would have been a major and obvious improvement in things? Now, my take is I preferred a superintendent who had gigantic watermelon balls and would have said to the Board of Ed and said to the state, we're going to just ignore the state guidelines and we're going to just keep everybody in the classroom and let the kids do what the kids need to do. If the kids want to wear masks, they can wear masks. If the parents want their kids vaccinated, they can go get them vaccinated. If the parents want to pull their kids out of the schooling system like they did in droves in 2020 and in 2021 and seem to be continuing to do over in 2022, not just in New Milford, but across the country and especially in Connecticut, and enter them into either private schooling or homeschooling, go ahead. Right? We've seen the age striations when it comes to COVID transmission and outcomes. Parents can make decisions. The single best predictor for educational outcomes is parental involvement. And yes, the last 2 years, I think we're going to look back on this and say, man, we have irreparably damaged an entire generation of kids because of the way we have generally treated COVID in the classroom. And I don't think that the way Alicia DeCorpo has handled that in reflection to that, it's not the way I would have done it, but I don't know who that superintendent is that would have had the brass balls to do what I would want them to do, which is, middle finger to the state, middle finger to the Board of Education, middle finger to the health department. We're putting the kids back in class. Deal with it. And we're not wasting time and money on these virtual classrooms where nobody's doing any learning. But the thing is that in these virtual classrooms, there isn't any learning going on in Brookfield. There isn't any learning going on in New Fairfield. There isn't any learning going on in the Chappaqua district. There isn't any learning going on in these virtual classrooms across the state because they're virtual classrooms, right? How on earth are you supposed to expect a 6-year-old to learn from 8 hours in front of a screen? It's just not happening. What are the things a 5-year-old needs to learn when it comes to their education? Honestly, A handful of ABCs, a handful of 1, 2, 3s, and social interactions. What is appropriate? What is an appropriate way to act around other people? And you can't replicate that in the virtual classroom. When it comes to coming back to the classroom, what are the things that those 5-year-olds need to learn? They need to learn to enunciate and speak. They need to learn the basics of the English language, which is really tough to do with muffled speech and with mouths you can't see. There are a lot of kids that are going to be irreparably damaged as a result of that, but this really isn't necessarily specific to Alicia. If I was superintendent, yes, things would have been radically different. Also, I would have violated the law in doing that, and I would have been fired. So I don't know who it is that we would have replaced Alicia DeCorpo with to meet the standards and the expectations that are being set. And I don't even know what those expectations are. So I'd love to hear from the community on this matter. I'd love to get more information on this matter. Let me know what you guys think on this whole thing. But quite frankly, I am not at a threshold now where I can sign this petition. I am not at a threshold where I would be asking for somebody's job and their career and their livelihood over what we've seen complaints about. And the fact of the matter is, it's really easy to call for somebody's termination. It's really easy to get people on board with a petition to call for somebody else's job. It's much harder to find the person that's going to be there better. It's much harder to say, this is the person we want long term, and they're definitely going to be better. And for God's sake, if we're asking for the state to intervene in all this, in a country whose whole system of governance was built around devolution, man, there better be a war breaking out. And we're not there. So anyways, that's been all I've got for today. I'm just going to go through the commentary on the show here tonight, both in YouTube and nothing on YouTube, and we'll wrap up our things with the commentary here. Like we do on the Mike Sennello Show, we always do live Q&A. This is your opportunity, by the way, to hold my feet to the fire. If I'm talking out my ass, if I'm saying something completely ridiculous, this is your chance to say, Mike, you're an idiot, and here's why. Do it. If there are people watching, and I know there are, and I know who those people are, thanks to everyone who watches the show, even those who are partisan hacks acting in opposition to everything I say. I greatly appreciate my audience. I'm always grateful for the people that stay tuned every Sunday night at 7 p.m. on the Mike Sennello Show, where we talk about all things that relate to news and politics here in New Milford. So forever grateful. And again, this section that we're about to get into, the Q&A section, is your opportunity to hold my feet to the fire. So let's see. We get back to Danny C. That's what I was referring to, the petition. Yes, when it comes to New Milford residents, it's tough to tell if they're New Milford residents or not because it's a petition that is online versus in person. Anyone from here to Timbuktu, and I mean genuinely from here to Timbuktu, a city in Nigeria, I think. It's either Mauritania, somewhere in that area of Africa. Dave Reisky, thoughts on the phone calls from Alicia DeCorpo about the walkout tomorrow? Oh, yes. Do we? Okay, so let's cover that. Doggone it, it's 8:40. We're going to have to cover this. Want to have a conversation about it with my son, and he would like different viewpoints. He is torn because the 9 a.m. time is during band, and they have a concert Thursday. But on the other hand, he likes Mr. Manka, and if everyone walks out, he feels the pressure. Okay, let's start with this. There are many ways to protest a decision. Tell your son, is this the right way to protest this decision? Is this something you're willing to risk getting suspended over? Because quite frankly, when it comes to civil disobedience, as Henry David Thoreau wrote, and it wasn't the only thing he ever got right, as Henry David Thoreau wrote in his Civil Disobedience, when you knowingly disobey the law, you're supposed to accept the consequences for that disobedience, just like Gandhi, right? And if the Milford Public Schools has to hand out 1,300 suspensions tomorrow, then they have to hand out 1,300 suspensions tomorrow. And that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. And the reason you do that is because if the punishment seems ridiculous and doesn't fit the crime, it will bring further light to the issue. It will make it even more visible. And if you're the one that looks like a clown, then you'll be proved to look like a clown. So Yes, New Milford Public Schools during tomorrow's walkout absolutely should suspend everyone who walks out in violation of school policy. But if you're having a conversation with your kid, this is probably a good age to say, what are some other ways to protest this? What are some other ways to show show how much you really liked Ray Manka as, it was Ray Manka, right? Sorry, I don't have kids in New Milford High School, so I don't know who the Ray Manka, yes. I don't know who the principal of these schools are. Is this the right way to go about things? Start with that, right? And start with the question of what are some other ways you could do this? And evaluate whether or not this is the best of those options. So tomorrow there is a walkout scheduled, and I did forget to cover this. So let's give this one quick shot. Thoughts on the phone call from Alicia DeCorpo about the walkout tomorrow? I have not heard the phone call, so I cannot comment on that. Want to have a conversation about it with my son, Eileen Gillis, and would like 2 different viewpoints. He is torn because the 9 a.m. time is during band, and they have a concert Thursday. But on the other hand, he likes Mr. Manka, and if everyone walks out, he feels the pressure. How much does he like Ray Manka? That's the first question I would be asking myself, and I would be asking my son. I'm not saying you should. How much do you like Ray Manka? How much do you oppose the fact that he is not there anymore? So I can't quite make heads or tails of what was said during the phone call. Danielle Greco, I'm still trying to figure out what the point of the call was, so I don't know what this is. Here we go. David Silve, it's important for this generation to learn what it is to stand up for what they believe in and voice their opinion in a way that, collectively, they can make a difference. Absolutely not. No, this is the absolute wrong take on this matter. These kids are between the ages of 13, well, it's April, 14 and 18. And in extremely rare cases, maybe 19. Absolutely not. No. They should be learning from your parents proper values, proper decision making, period. First. They should not be learning, they should be learning individual responsibility, not collective action and the power of the collective. Absolutely not. No. Human beings have agency, and that means that you have to value individuality. That's built into that concept. So they should be learning at an individual level what is right and what is wrong, and from their parents first. And this is a conversation about how a parent is going to be treating the walkout tomorrow. And it's important for this generation to learn what it is to stand up for what they believe in. No. What do they actually believe in, and why? That's a much more important question. I'm sorry, but when I was 13 or 14 or 15 or even 16, I was a damn teenager and didn't know diddly. I'm sorry, but there's a reason we don't allow 15-year-olds to vote. And that's because they're 15. They don't know diddly. They don't have these points and these opinions and these positions well thought out or well articulated. They can't possibly have, because these concepts take years to fully be formulated. So sorry, but no, I cannot stand for this take. I'm wholly opposed to this idea that it is important for this generation to learn what it is to stand up for what they believe in and voice their opinion in a way that collectively they can make a difference in obvious support of walking out of schools. No, they should learn what is right and what is wrong, and they should learn how to make value judgments first, at an individual level. Know thyself, right? That's what they should be learning. And in the home, from their parents. And this is why I've said that the questions you should be asking your kid are, how much did you really like this teacher? Did you really like them so much that you're going to get suspended? And by the way, what does a walkout achieve? They're kids. Listen, I never participated in a walkout because there was never one that was actually organized when I was in school. Except when I was a freshman, and then I was a freshman, and then just from a practical standpoint, it made no sense for me to walk out. I didn't have a way of doing it, right? Because it was a different school. I went to the old high school for my freshman year. What's now Sennello. Kids are going to use any excuse they can to get out of school. Any excuse. So I would definitely caution against this, because the idea is going to be, well, then all they're doing is just standing up for what they believe in. Why should they be punished for that? Because they broke the rules, right? is walking out of school, what is that going to achieve? Right? What it's going to achieve at most is if hundreds of kids walk out, is it's going to force New Milford Public Schools to issue hundreds of suspensions. So the reason you would walk out is to bog down New Milford Public Schools with these suspensions. And then by having all of these suspensions, then the conversation gets forced from the suspensions, right? Is it completely ridiculous that 600 kids get suspended from school? Well, if it's not, well, then what did they achieve? Well, what is the actual point of doing all of this? If it is, then there you go. But that's the conversation you should be having. The conversation shouldn't be we're just going to find an excuse to walk out of school because we're kids. And that's what kids do. Like, I'm sorry, but you have to understand that this is coming from kids. And yes, Scott Ivey, the big thing you have to consider is how much will this walkout change anything? Right. What is the point of walking out of a school? This is more from Anthony Peeburn. It depends what is more important to him. It's tough to choose sometimes. I'm sure he will do the right thing for him. No. He should just be doing the right thing. He should just be doing the right thing. Don't think of what's the right thing for him. What is the right thing to do for any human being to do in any situation? That's the proper approach to all of this. Laura Boynton asks, let's go back to here. Laura Boynton asks a legitimately great question. Just a question. Did anyone ask why Mr. Manka is leaving? Does it actually have something to do with the superintendent, or could there be his own personal reasons? The students should stay in school if they show up tomorrow and any other day. Fair. Both comments are fair. So no, I would say when it comes to students walking out of a school, again, there's a pretty high bar there to meet, because the reason you should walk out of school is because you know you're going to get suspended, and then you accept the suspension, and it's the mass suspensions that produce whatever result that you're looking for, right? Which is why if you're having a conversation with your kid, the conversation should be not what is the right thing for you, what is the right thing to do, period. And a great way to frame this would be something along the lines of, what are some other ways to show your love for this teacher? And would they be more effective? Are they going to be worth the cost? Because the cost of ditching school is suspension. Is it going to be worth what you have to go through when you go through this? Now, again, they're going to be living the YOLO life because they're teenagers and they're invincible, right? So take that all with a grain of salt. Now, I don't know what I would do in this situation beyond that. But if we're talking about the conversation that's going to be had in advance of it, the Socratic method is an extremely useful tool, because the Socratic method, for people who don't know, just look it up. Wiki, Socratic method. Basically, you're asking questions that are targeted towards getting the person who's answering the questions, in this case, your son or daughter, to come to a reasonable conclusion, right? So this would be things like, okay, great. So what do you think is going to happen when you walk out of school? Okay, are you going to get suspended? What's the suspension going to be like? How is that going to affect the other things you're trying to achieve with school, which is learning or preparing to enter the real world beyond that, preparing for whatever is in your life beyond that? What are some other ways? Let's think of a lot of ways. If you really love this principle, then you should be able to think of a dozen different ways to show your love for this principle and to show your appreciation for this principle. Let's write them down, and then let's produce a score. Like, how useful is it going to be to do this? How badly do I want to do this? What's the cost going to be? And let's just do a quick T-chart and just put a number score. You let them come up with any number they want, subtract one from the other, and see which one has the highest, result to cost ratio, right? And again, beyond that, I don't know what I would do. I don't have kids. I don't have kids in high school. I don't know what I would do, right? I don't know how I would instill into my kid at that age the idea that, listen, there are rules and you have to abide by them, right? And in this case, if you walk out of school, you know that you're walking out of school knowing that you're going to get suspended, and you don't put up a fight. You do not put up a fight. The show of support is in getting suspended, not just in walking out of school. So anyways, I think we've gotten through just about everything. Let me just check the comments here one last time. because we did cover everything I wanted to cover, even though this show is now the longest show I've done in a very long time. I got some more comments coming in. Leslie Anderson Sarich, what about college protests? Are they acceptable? Again, first things first. College a 20-year-old in college, in terms of their mental development, is completely different from a 14-year-old in high school. So let's make sure we get through that. In terms of college protests, what are they protesting? Why? What is the format that they're protesting in? And what do they look to achieve in those specifics? So I would need way more information to pass judgment on college protests. When it comes to should the University of California, Berkeley students burn down their school because evil Ben Shapiro is going to come to talk about personal responsibility and come to give a speech about how great the country is and all of the good aspects of things like representative forms of government, right? And what good principles and morals are. Should those students be allowed to burn down the school? No, absolutely not. And honestly, my take on all of that is screw you guys. Screw you guys for burning down Berkeley, for destroying the campus because Ben Shapiro decided that he was going to. Ben Shapiro was getting paid by the campus Republican Party to come give a speech. Ooh-wee. And again, too, like, what is the protest? If the protest is a riot, screw you. Screw you. In virtually every case, screw you. So, yeah, I would need more information about that when it comes to colleges. Danny C., and peer pressure to walk out or the feeling of retaliation if you don't. Yeah, true. What is the thing you're standing up for? Are you showing bravery by protesting and standing up for that thing? Or are you showing bravery for not protesting and standing up for responsibility in the classroom and standing up for another way of showing your support, let's say, for this former principal that would be a much more effective way of doing things? And again, Danny C., if you've got kids and you're dealing with that question when it comes to peer pressure and the retaliations if you don't walk out, I don't have an answer. I wish I had an answer for you. There isn't a great answer to this, right? These are the consequences that you're going to run into in life. And I hope that people who see the walkout tomorrow understand that this is part of the calculus that these kids are making here. I wonder what percentage of this, let's say it's 600 kids walk out tomorrow. It's not going to be, but let's say it's 600. What percentage of that 600 are these kids who are doing it because it's cool? Are doing it because they're going to get torched in school. They're going to get torched on social media if they don't do it. Right? Who are you? Are you the fascist that's in support of Alicia DeCorpo? It's 2022. That's something that they could face. And I hope by the time that they're teenagers, parents have provided them with the tools that they need to ward that off or to at least absorb that blow. Or maybe a warm and welcoming home in the event that they have to fight this off and don't have the strength to do it themselves. So that when they come home from school for not protesting, they have a family that will, unconditionally love them and will, because they have an obligation to do that, right? When a kid decides not to walk out because and faces the peer pressure and faces retaliation because of it, if that's the right decision, then the family should say, this is the right decision. You did the right thing. Screw those people. And that's really all there is to say to that. So anyways, that's enough for tonight. It's almost 9:00. We got to close this show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week as we always are, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. at the Mike Sennello Show. Always love the live Q&A that you guys bring to the show. We're also live streaming on YouTube as well. So check that out. Link is in this video's description. We'll see you next week. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Good night, everybody.